All right, welcome back, everybody. To Talk Openly. My name's Jac, and I'm here with my excellent and astounding friend Daniel, who I'm just always appreciative of every single week. So thank you, Daniel, for being here tonight.
You're welcome, Jac. The feeling is most assuredly reciprocated on my end. It's mutual. And
I'm
hi,
so
everybody
glad.
out there. Yeah, I know, me too. And I'm thankful for our listeners and watchers. And I'm excited to jump into tonight's discussion.
Yeah, the Noble Eightfold Path, which is kind of one of those like foundation blocks of Buddhism. And yet for me, as someone who's been, practicing for almost 5 years, it's something that I don't have like rigorously memorized, right? It's like I know that it exists. And when I look at it, when I looked it up, I was like, okay, I do know all these concepts, but as a system, it wasn't, it's not concrete yet. So
Yeah,
this will be good.
it's the same with me. I haven't been studying as long or probably as rigorously as you have, but even so, it's one of those things where it's like it is foundational. Like it is. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like right there in the beginning, and yeah, I don't. It's not like I have it memorized, but when I go through and look at it, I'm like, yep. This is all that we're talking about. This is what we're doing. We're just approaching it from different angles, but I think
Right.
it'd be well worth it. It'd be really cool to just sort of dedicate a little bit of time to just memorize it. Be easy.
Yeah,
It wouldn't
I
be
think so too.
hard, right? Like it's 8 points.
8 points. Yeah.
Come on,
Yeah.
we could do
And
that.
and we know them. We just
Yeah,
don't have them all together. Yeah.
yeah. Like if somebody asks me, I'll be like, well, it's like the right view,
I
right
know.
livelihood, right, effort, or what, right speech, and I'll kind of remember them, but
Yeah.
it'd be nice just to have them down.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And that's what I love about the Tibetan Buddhist system is that things are so kind of like systematized. And I'd be curious to know, for those who are uh, studiers of Buddhism, like, and this is probably easy to find, but I'm guessing the Eightfold Path is in all the kind of legacies of Buddhism, not just in kind of the Tibetan Buddhism, which Tibetan Buddhism is so good at lists, right?
Right.
But these ideas are so foundational that I'm assuming that they're absolutely a part of every other Buddhist system.
Yeah,
um
they are. I think that my understanding is that the focus is a little bit different.
ah
Like the what they're, like so, you might have Theravadins might be focused a bit more like on ethics, for example, and like the way that they maybe approach it is maybe, or focus on it, or is a little bit different. But I think generally speaking, all of the schools of Buddhism, all of the vehicles do include the Noble Eightfold Path. The
Great.
one thing I think sometimes yeah, like westernized Buddhism, I think is maybe a little bit a little bit different, in the sense that it's included, but it's a bit more like practical, you know?
Mm,
Yeah,
hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I think these things are practical,
Oh yeah.
certainly, and they make life a lot easier for sure. But before we launch into that, because I know we have plenty to talk about
Oh yeah.
with the Eightfold Path, but I do want to check in and just see how things are going, what your week is like, and what your practice is like. I see you've got some ice water. I'm assuming it's hot.
It's not too bad.
Oh,
Today
good.
it's been hot, but no, it's like I don't know. I think it's like 90 degrees or something.
Ah,
It's not it's not bad. It's just warm. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I dig it. I think
Yeah.
to me, like I used to think that that was really hot, but I've gotten acclimated, and now I'm like, if it's 100 degrees, it's all right. It's fine.
Yeah, no,
It's
I
hot.
remember
Don't get me
that.
wrong. It's
Yeah.
hot, but it's like it's okay. It's when it gets up into like 110, 115, and
Well, yeah.
then it's kind of outrageous, you know. But even then, maybe I'll acclimate to it. I don't
Yeah.
know. But you know what was really what was beautiful is so I ran into our friend Matthew at the temple on
Nice.
Sunday, and he said, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? And I was like, I'm working. He goes, come on, just like take off of work and go float the American River with me. And and I was like, oh, that sounds so tempting, but no, man, I got all day. I got work, 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 work. He
Yeah.
was like, and I was like, but it does sound really good. And I was like, well, maybe I can do it.
Oh my God.
And so then like I thought about it, and then like the next I told him, I was like, I'll let you know tomorrow, right? So then I started, the day starts with like work meetings. I'm up early going to town. And then like I was like, I'm just gonna do it. So I called it quits like halfway through the day, ran up, met with Matthew, we got into the river and just floated down, and I was so nice. Like, yeah, it was hot outside, but it
Nice.
wasn't hot on the river, like you're in the water, it
Yeah.
was beautiful. We had a great time and just talked and talked and talked and talked.
Man, that sounds like a perfect day. Where on the American River?
Just like sort of in the like Citrus Heights area.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah, it's like right by where Matthew lives now, kind of close to, I guess Llama lives in that area too. So
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
right. I don't know what that area is really called, but yeah, I think it's called like, I don't know, maybe like Citrus Heights area,
Yeah. Oh,
but it
cool.
was fun. It was really nice. Yep.
I
So
miss the
that
American
was a
River.
highlight. And then my kids are traveling with their mom now, so my days are a little bit, like less full, which is kind of
Yeah.
cool. Like it's just a nice experience to have, like full on where I'm like really involved every day, and then like not. So I miss them terribly, but at the same time, it's kind of nice to have a little bit more time.
Yeah. Some me
Yeah,
time.
and I got to tell you something with my practice that's kind of cool. So on Sunday at the group meditation before the talk, Lama was leading it, and he said, he gave some advice that I ended up using and thought it was pretty helpful. He said sometimes it can be helpful just to break your sit up, right? So instead of sitting for one long period of time, he said, sit for like, I don't know, like if you were going to sit for 24 minutes, then, maybe break it up into 12 and 12. Or if you're going to sit for 36, then, 18, 8, whatever, just break it up a little bit and
Mm-hmm.
do one sit and then get up and stretch, move around a little bit, get the blood flowing. And he did some stretching exercises, which were really helpful. And then sit again. And he said it really is kind of cool because you can see the mind state sort of before and after. Instead of seeing it as one continuous thing, you get to compare and contrast, like what was my first sit like and what was my second sit like. And I ended up using it just in my own practice. And I really liked it. I think for two reasons, for the reasons he described, but also I get the sense like I can sit quite a bit longer that way. I think I get a little like restless, or like my body starts, like my knees hurt or something like that, and then, then I get kind of like, maybe I shouldn't be sitting so long. Whereas if I break it up and do some stretches and stuff, then it's totally doable to sit quite a bit longer.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, and something I do too, which helps me, um, is that sometimes I'll have a meditation where I have like a halfway bell that just kind of
Oh
like
yeah.
dings at halfway. And it's just kind of a reminder, like, okay, I don't need to check my phone. I kind of know where I'm at. And I can settle in for the rest of this, because
Yeah.
I tend to I get a little bit amped up about like, okay, I got to really focus, and I get a little bit intense about,
Yeah.
where I'm at in the sit. And so if I know like, okay, the bell's going to go off, then I have a little bit more peacefulness about it, I feel.
I know exactly what you mean. It's I've put those intentionally in there sometimes, just as a because if I'm sitting for a while, my mind starts to think like, is my phone quiet? Did I turn it on? Is it,
Right.
is it gonna go? And then I feel like I sometimes will actually like pick it up and look at it, and that just
Oh, me
throws
too.
that throws it off.
Yeah,
I don't like doing that because it kind of messes with it. But if I just have like a little, I use Insight Timer, which has a bunch of
me too.
yeah, and it has a bunch of different sounds for bells, and I like the one that's like the wood blocks. It just like
Oh,
it just
yeah.
makes a very, it's not a bell really, it just like makes a sound. It's very like, I know what it is and it just brings me back, right? It's sort of like, like the dogs barking or something like that. Like it's just like sounds oftentimes can like bring me back, but this is sort of an intentional use of the bell system to do just that, and to sort of allay any fears that I might be going over the time that I allotted, or
Right. And how
things like
horrible
that.
that would be if it
Oh
did.
no. Well, I think that like there are times where I intentionally just don't use an app and I don't use a timer at all.
Yeah.
Just to break, because I think it's too much habit pattern. You know what I mean? Like it could get
Yeah.
like too much where like I only sit for a certain amount of time. Sometimes I just want to sit until I'm done sitting,
Yeah,
like,
totally. No, I think that's a really good thing to train in as well. Like, I think it's good to have both, right? To
yeah,
practice with like, okay, I'm going to be intentional about a certain time,
yeah,
because that's really good training too. And then the other is like, I'm just gonna like train to failure or whatever, or until like I don't feel like it anymore.
that's right.
And just see what it's like. It's totally, Lama uses that metaphor of, meditation is like being in the gym, where you've got like all the weights, you've got timers, and you're working these specific muscles. Um,
Yeah,
and then, we take our strength out into the real world, and use it. Same exact thing with the meditation sit is we're training in different ways, so that when we go out in the real world, we have various skills with our mind.
totally.
Um,
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Nothing wrong with a little experimentation.
yeah, definitely.
I think that that's one thing that I really appreciate about Lama, and part of what he was talking about on Sunday was about like like sure there are systems of meditation that can be quite rigid, and they have their usefulness or whatever, but that generally speaking for us, it's better to be like, yeah, sure, some have some discipline, right, be still, but also flex a little bit, be willing to adapt. Like for example, if you're hurting, it's okay, move, stand up, do something, right? You shouldn't be sitting there hurting. Like a little bit of pain can be interesting from a meditative perspective. There's nothing bad about it, but
Yeah.
like at the same time, we're not here to suffer more, right? Yeah. So anyway, that's sort of where I'm at. My meditation sessions are fine and dandy, going well.
Nice.
And I am kind of looking forward. I think I'm gonna add a little bit of time and split it up, see how that works. I do actually, most of the time what I do is I have like I dedicate a certain percentage of the time to shamatha, and then I do 2 sets of Tonglen afterward. And so
Nice.
I have like a bell system saved in Insight Timer that like dings after the first one, and then
Yeah.
it gives me the one Tonglen session, then gives me like 1 minute of shamatha, then back into Tonglen.
That's a great idea. Yeah, I want to work some Tonglen into my practice. I notice when I am doing Tonglen, my perspective on my world is just so much gentler and engaged. And yeah, right now I'm in my world and kind of my training. I just feel very stressed.
Mhm.
And I've just got so much on my plate. I've got a couple summer classes that are really, really, really intense. And so I'm just dealing with that. Um, and I noticed this kind of like, tension, like tightness in my mind, when I'm meditating. Not all the time, but certainly a lot of the time. And I think Tonglen really it brings in that imagination quality that I think can really, I don't know, create a lot of flexibility in the mind. Not have so much tightness. I've always felt
Yeah.
imagination is really powerful for that. So I really like visual practices, like
But
Tonglen or yeah.
right, I think especially given that situation that you just described, if you do the Tonglen exercises that start with yourself, which, you know, like if you do that, that really softens things up like a
Yeah.
lot for, you know, towards yourself, where there's a lot more sort of like, it's okay, right?
Right.
Like there's that aspect of it. And you know, our friend Patty said something the other day. I've heard this before, but I've never really applied it consistently, which was she was talking about in meditation about like if you're using the breath, then to sort of do the intentional in breath and then just let it the out breath just happen on its own, just let it fall on its own.
Hmm.
And normally I don't do that. Normally I'm there, I try to remain present for the full cycle, right? And so I'll be like taking an active interest in my breath in and out, in and out. Whereas what was really interesting, and this the reason I'm bringing this up is what you mentioned. What I noticed was that when I did what she said, and I really intentionally focused on the in breath, but then just
Hmm.
let go on the out breath, then I felt a drop, like with each out breath, there was a
Yeah.
soften, and the tension, the tightness, the sort of anxious energy, whatever you want to call that tightness, it dropped with every single out breath. So
Yeah.
it got really calm. So maybe just from a functional perspective, maybe that would be helpful.
Definitely. No, I'm gonna try that. Yeah, I'm also gonna try breaking up my sessions.
Yeah.
Do like 15 in the morning and maybe 15 at night or something. See how that goes.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry
I
you're
also
stressed. That sucks.
thank you. Yeah,
Uh,
thanks.
this too shall pass.
Yeah, it definitely will. And yeah, I had Darshan the other day with Mama. And I was just, talking about some of how this has been impacting my mind and my meditation. And I said, at the same time, I know like this is only going to be 9 more months until school's done. And he just was very, like that's the spirit, and it was just so simple, but it was so encouraging. Like, okay,
Yeah.
that is the way I need to think about it. Is like, okay, just 9 months. That's
Yeah.
it. And in
Yeah.
the meantime, like I don't want to just barrel through it. I want to experience my life. I don't want to just turn off. So yeah, but holding multiple truths at once, that it's only 9 months and I can see what happens in it and engage with
Totally.
it. Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I also I really like the approach of, I think it was maybe Dirk one time, when I was doing a meditation sit with Sangha. And I mentioned how I was having a lot of distraction, and kind of chaos in my mind. And he mentioned, well, that can be a meditation in itself, is kind of like turning to look at that mind that is so distracted or
Yeah.
dull or whatever it is, and just kind of notice like, wow, what is this experience like?
That's right. Yeah.
Look at it with some curiosity, and just, since that's what is present
That's it.
and is showing up, why not like try and learn about it in the moment, because it's
Right.
there. So
Right.
I like that one. And that feels really compassionate, because it's, I'm experiencing this stress, and if I can learn to feel it and sense it, I feel like that is a compassionate act, and it's, not trying to push any of my experience away.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Do you notice, I'm just curious, with the stress, is it accompanied by a narrative? Like, do you notice that there's particular thoughts or a particular story that happens that sort of induces it? Or is it more like, no, my body is stressed out and I'm sitting down and I'm just seeing like I'm tight and anxious?
I think it's both. Yeah. But the story that I do hear a lot in my mind is just like, it's too much. And so I think what happens a lot is that, I'm broadcasting into the future and seeing, all the steps of having to, like, within the next week or the next month. And it's like, no, it's too much. It's too much. And it's overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I mean, one thing that's great about meditation is that I can actively say, well, I'm not doing all of that right now. I'm right here.
Yeah.
So how about I do that?
Yeah. Of all the
Which is,
things that I
easier
need,
said than done.
right? All the things I'm worried about, most of them are not here right now.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're right. Easier said than done. It's still gonna, the mind's still gonna play its games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks for sharing.
Well, yeah, and thanks for listening and your helpful comments. And I wonder too if a Lojong slogan tonight, not wonder, I know that the Lojong slogan tonight is gonna help us with whatever the struggle is.
I gotta tell you, you've been instrumental in my my use of Lojong slogans, really encouraging me to do that, and it has become such a valuable practice. Like, I find myself sometimes just like not even necessarily whatever the slogan was for that day, but just I'll just be thinking about it, like I said, they're wonderful objects or thoughts to contemplate.
Yeah, so
Yeah, so
helpful.
thank you for that.
Oh yeah, thanks for saying that.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's see what it says
Do
now.
it. All right. Number 23. Always practice the 3 general principles. I don't know what the 3 general principles are, so let's see what Choyam Trungpa has to say. So he says this slogan is a general description as to how we can practice the Buddha Dharma according to the 3 basic principles of Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. It is connected with a sense of keeping the discipline of all 3 yanas: Hinayana mindfulness practice, Mahayana benevolence, and Vajrayana crazy wisdom, all at the same time. So the 3 vehicles. And then Traleg Kyabgon wrote, this commitment relates to our motivation to practice mind training. If we recognize from the beginning that Lojong is a powerful and beneficial practice, we'll commit ourselves in a genuine and continuous way by retaining a sense of impartiality and guarding against distortion. So according to Traleg Kyabgon, the 3 principles are: 1, remember to value your commitment; 2, refrain from distorted forms of thinking; and 3, refrain from falling into partiality.
It's interesting that the 3 principles appear to be different according to these 2 teachers.
That is very interesting. Yeah, so the first one was talking about like the 3 vehicles. So Hinayana, which as far as I understand, Hinayana is kind of about like ethical conduct, so how are we engaging with ourselves and other beings in the world so that we're not doing any more harm. And so kind of removing actions that do cause harm and engaging in actions that are good. And Mahayana is like kind of, as far as I know, it's kind of entering into like a bodhisattva path. Am I right?
Yeah, that sounds right to me. That's where like bodhicitta really starts to come into play.
Right. So that we're not doing the path for ourselves. We're really understanding that that true enlightenment is when we're doing it for all sentient beings.
Yep.
And then Vajrayana is kind of like the highest, which I don't have a clear understanding of, but I love that he says that crazy wisdom, which I imagine is just this kind of like all expansive intelligence and compassion of a Buddha, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that, it's interesting. Matthew and I, we were talking at length about this on our floating trip, and he spent a lot of time doing Zen practice, and Zen is kind of like, can be viewed as a branch of Mahayana, and what he was saying, the difference between, because he said, he was like, yeah, he, like he really loves Zen, but then some of his teachers were like, "You sure this is right for you?" and then when he got into Vajrayana, he was like, "Oh yeah, this is it. This is the right one for me." And when he was talking about that, what I asked him to describe the difference, and he said that at least with his experience with Zen, that the Mahayana traditions are really focused on, it really is on being good. It's like being good to yourself, being compassionate, kind, loving kindness, and that it's very heavy in that direction, right? So at all times you're loving and kind and compassionate, right? You put a lot of effort into that. Whereas with Vajrayana, like it can include some wrathfulness, it can, it's more dynamic and it's more sort of situational, and more flexible. And so
engaging with all of it, all
with
of
the
life.
whole
Yeah,
spectrum.
the
That's
whole
right.
thing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And I've
And
heard,
how interesting. I
yeah,
was just
go
going to
ahead.
say how interesting here that, he's saying we're doing all of that at the same time.
That's right.
So all
Exactly.
three of those levels,
That's
keeping
right.
in mind at the same time. So that's a lot.
Exactly. Well, I've heard that, sometimes people get into comparisons of the different schools, or different vehicles here. And it's not, none of them are wrong, none of them are better, nothing like that, right? But sometimes people get into that sort of comparison, and oftentimes there's been this sort of criticism of Vajrayana, like, oh, you're not doing like the strict mindfulness and ethics, right, of Hinayana. And same with like, well, you're not so focused on the goodness qualities, or on the loving kindness and compassion, right? Like you're not doing it right. But the thing is that it's actually, we have to do all three.
All of them. Yeah.
All of them. That's so it makes it's a bit more challenging, but maybe I don't know, kind of a little bit more fun too, at least from my perspective.
I think so too. Yeah, I love a complicated approach.
Messy.
Yeah, messy.
Hot and messy.
I know. I mean, that's our lives, right?
My life for sure. Yeah, yeah. Sounds like it's yours too, Jac.
Oh yeah, yeah. And then so that Charlie Kevyon says, to value your commitment, refrain from distorted forms of thinking, and refrain from falling into partiality. So those are three other ways to be thinking about this.
Do you think that refrain from falling into partiality means like partial practice?
I was thinking of it more as like that you want to maintain equanimity within your world. So rather than falling into partiality towards
certain
things and not towards others. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Basically just being partial, having attachments and aversions. Ooh, this is a lovely tanka of green Tara. That's nice.
That's beautiful.
Tara is such a badass.
Really, truly.
Yes. Well, great. For folks watching and listening, check out the Lojong slogan generator. It's really fun. And you get those beautiful pictures.
That's right. It's on lionsroardharmacenter.org.
Yay.
Little plug there.
I like it. Well, Daniel.
Well, Jac.
I feel like Lojong is such a great lead-in for our topic tonight, because it's all about developing wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline.
Yep.
Which I learned today are the three essential categories within the Noble Eightfold Path. And so with that, I think we can enter.
Yeah, well, maybe a little bit of background, right? A lot of people, I think, are probably familiar with the Four Noble Truths, right?
Yep.
But it sort of, I think that it oftentimes kind of gets just sort of summarized. I heard somebody just the other day summarize it as like, Buddhism just says life is suffering.
I heard that recently too. yeah, that
you know?
someone was, and feeling really depressed about that, which I
Yeah, there was a
understand.
saying. Yeah, the person who said this that recently was like, yeah, that's right. Life does suck and it is just suffering, but
Right,
then it just stops. Like, that's
right,
it.
just there. Yeah,
Like, and
most
it's like,
definitely.
whoa, 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 hang on. There's more to this story than that.
Right, right. Yeah, I remember it was actually in a class. I was in a a class and someone was talking about, just the kind of despair of working in mental health. And they were like, well, and the Buddha said that life is suffering, so I guess we just gotta deal with it, basically. That was their kind of
That's
conclusion.
right. Yep.
Yeah. And then of course, that's like you said, that's not it. There's so of course there's the truth of the origin of suffering, which is that, we have this kind of fundamental ignorance that leads us to, grasp at things that are impermanent and have aversion for loss and things that we don't want. That is the origin of our suffering. But then that there's the truth of the cessation of suffering. Like that's the pivot. That's where we get to work on this and move
Yep.
beyond. But yeah, it's so funny that we've both experienced that recently, where people just had a very limited understanding.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting too, because there are so many variants on the Four Noble Truths, so many different interpretations. I mean, so from like from sort of like a scriptural level, it really doesn't say much. It's not heavy-handed with the language. It really is the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering. That's literally like, that's it, right?
Yeah.
But the way that it gets sort of interpreted, there's all kinds of different ways. Do you mind if I share one of my favorites?
Please,
I
yes.
saw this image earlier and I really liked it. It was said the truth of suffering is that we live in an ongoing state of dissatisfaction. So a lot of times, suffering is oftentimes it's like, yeah, it's terrible, it's awful. No, sometimes it's just stress.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just the dissatisfaction. I've also heard it said, like set forth as dis-ease, right? Like disease, but
Yeah.
dis-ease, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's the truth of suffering. And then the
And
origin,
that, it's not just things that we don't like, of
right.
course.
Of course,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, right.
Right. That is a core part of suffering, is that we really like certain things
Uh-huh.
and they're not going to stick around.
That's
Yeah.
amen. Yeah, so that's like there's this core sort of like dissatisfaction in life, and then that there's the truth of the origin of suffering. I liked what you said. I've also heard that many people just say that desire is the root or is the origin of suffering. But the thing that I read that I really liked is just simply suffering arises from causes and conditions. To me, it's just like it's leading up to point number 4, which is where we're going
Hmm.
tonight, right? And so
Hmm.
then point number 3 says the truth of cessation. There's a possibility of reaching a state where dissatisfaction and suffering has ceased. That's the pivot that you're talking about, right? Like that's what what I like about this is hey, there's hope, right? Yes. So like, let's not stop at the whole this truth of suffering that yes, it's there. But hey, there's this possibility that because it comes from causes and conditions, that
Yeah.
perhaps the causes and conditions that lead to its cessation are possible as well. And
Right.
that
Right.
takes us to number 4, which is there's a path for us to follow that will bring us to that state, right? And
Right.
I love it. And like I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like logically, it's just like it's just a beautiful sort of layup where you're like, yeah, here's the problem, right? Here's the cause of the problem. There is a solution, and here's the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great way to describe it, very simply. And that, I think there's some resistance around that there is a pivot point, right? Because a lot of
Uh-huh.
times, and this is something I've been experiencing
Yeah.
recently, is that sometimes I kind of like to stay in the suffering, right? Like, I just suck and everyone sucks And
Yeah.
this whole thing is just miserable. There's something kind of
Yeah, it
satisfying
feels
in a
so
horrible
solid
way.
and real and
I know, like,
yeah.
oh, we'll never, God, we're just, humans are so messed up. We're never going to get out of this mess. And then it allows me to have an enemy, which is just like, it's satisfying for a moment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But then
Also, it's this kind of, it's this like it's this thing that we tend to do, is like we can bitch about something, but when it comes to doing something about it, that's where we're resistant. Even if someone's like, oh, you're saying you got a problem, here's a solution, we so many times are like, no,
right,
I just want to
right,
complain.
right, totally. Yeah, it was so funny. I was sitting in a group this morning, really great group of folks on, in the hospital, and someone was saying how, you know, they can see the antidepressant in front of them. They know that it's worked in the past. And what do? They just can't take it, And I totally understand, that is such a common experience, that it's just like, maybe I just want to suffer, wallow in it a little bit, and just really bathe in it. And part of that is that also we know it, right? Like, we know that suffering very well. It's familiar. Like, we've been doing it for a long time. And so to imagine taking steps off to get out of the cycle is kind of scary. And yeah, it just feels like, maybe I can just cycle like this for a little while longer and see if that can work out for me.
Well, also because we tend to be sort of energy conserving creatures, right? So
True.
like the easy, just continuing with what is seems easier. It's a fallacy. It's not proper logic, right? Like, actually the way things are is incredibly inefficient, right? It manifests in this stressful state, this dissatisfied, diseased state. And that's not an efficient state, and it's not even one that makes good, it's not one that makes good use of the energy that you have, right? But somehow our mind tells us like, oh, it's easier just to not do anything than it is to do something, because the something is like an unknown. We don't like uncertainty, we don't like the unknown, we don't like change, and we don't like the idea of having to exert ourselves, especially when there's a part of us that doesn't believe it's true.
Totally. Yeah. I definitely resonate with that, where there's part of me that kind of doubts, like, no, this can't work, like, I'm not that smart. I'm actually not that compassionate. I think people are jerks, like, so yeah, there's definitely this part of me that's like, nah.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I think that's Lama talks often about, we're on this kind of diving board sometimes, where we're kind of jumping up on this diving board where it's like, no one's going to push us off it. We have to make the decision to leap into the pool. And I think that is, what we're talking about, is that, we can even see the path. We know what it is. And we're still going to just kind of hang out over here for a while and watch it. And so, maybe the step onto, the fourth noble truth is that we decide to jump, I'm going to jump in and actually see what all this is about, which is hard. It does take that.
I'm typically a jumper into water, but when it comes to the Noble Eightfold Path, I tiptoed into the baby.
I know it. Well, it's fun. I kind of I jumped, but I wasn't totally sure what I was doing.
Maybe a belly flop.
Exactly. I belly flopped. Well, I thought this there was this kind of breakdown of the 8 points on the path that I thought was really interesting. That there's these 3 essential categories of wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. So those are kind of these like categories, and then there's some subcategories under them. And under wisdom, the first one is right view or right understanding. And so that's kind of, reflecting on what we just talked about. So the Four Noble Truths. And then also, I think the four thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma is a really big part of this one too. So recognizing, that I have this rebirth where I can do a lot on my mind. I can really train, I can learn. And of course, impermanence, at the same time, this life is impermanent. And so I have to really, put some effort in now while I'm here. And then karma, cause and effect of our actions. And then, that samsara is suffering. So they're all kind of wrapped up together.
I like that it starts with right view or right understanding, because everything else kind of comes from that, right? The rest of it sort of flows logically from it. That having the right view then it's gonna influence everything, right? How we relate to ourselves, how we relate to other people, and to life itself, right? And I like the idea. So to me, the fact that it's considered right and truth, there's a part of me, because of my brainwashing as a child, that really resists that. And I'm like, what? There's no such thing. Everything is relative. There's no such thing as truth and all of that. But that's actually, I think that's fine. It's okay if anybody listening agrees with that's, it's all relative and nothing's actually true and it's not right. I think it's really great. That's a great starting point to then reflect on, well, what is it Buddhism is saying is certain? What is it saying is truth? Are the Four Noble Truths, is it true? Is it actually, can you sit with it and be like, yeah, actually, that's how it is? Can you sit with impermanence and be like, right, actually, come to think of it, right, and as you sit with it and you reflect on it, the right view sort of shows up and you're like, yeah, that's truth. It's undeniable. There is no one who can argue with you, no matter how, well, maybe okay, sorry, there are people who can argue.
Well, it's like, it's the law of gravity, right? That we are experiencing gravity right now. We can't refute it, but it's not something that we think about actively. And so just with these, kind of core tenets of like impermanence, interdependence, karma, these things that sound very complicated, and they are, but when we sit with it, we can start to see like, yeah, that just makes sense. This is kind of like a natural, like scientific, like you can test it and find the evidence in your own life and experience, which is really satisfying. And I think helps me stay on the path is when I can kind of test it to my own lived experience.
I think a lot of people will be sort of like, I believe in karma. What goes around comes around. And I see, change is the only, thing that's sort of like real. So I get impermanence. And then when it comes to like no self and interdependence, people sort of get stuck, especially on the no self. Sometimes they'll be like, okay, I can kind of see it, interdependence. But then it's sort of like, well, but no self follows from all of this, right? If you accept the other things, the no self comes. And if you just sit with that too, it's pretty easy. It's not that complicated. A lot of people will philosophize ad nauseum about it, right? But and have for centuries, for a long time, about this self versus no self. But to me, like once you really start to sit with it, it becomes pretty evident.
And I think it starts out with an intellectual understanding. Like I don't have any, deep realization about no self, but I can certainly think on it and be like, that makes sense. So I think it does start, it kind of starts up here and then it kind of sinks in a little bit in our
Totally.
understanding all of these things. It's funny as you're saying that, about maybe it's a little bit easier to sense interdependence. That's definitely the case for me, where it's, there's this almost kind of like romantic quality of like, oh, we're all in this
Yeah.
together, like we're all co-creating each other and co-creating our conditions and whatnot. So there's this kind of almost like fantastical element to it, which I think is really genuine. um, but then that idea that, okay, but it's all, what interdependence means is that it's empty of any permanent kind of essential thing, that like you can't just like, there's no like, there's nothing behind the curtain. I always
Right.
kind of think there's got to be something behind the veil that like
Yeah.
defines all of this.
Yeah. There has to be some
And
kind of a ground. There has to, right?
right, exactly.
There's something there. But like
Yeah,
you can look all you want.
and we have to, actually, that's the
Yeah.
only way that we
Yeah.
can learn with any certainty about any of this stuff, is we have to investigate. um I love it. What about that second one? So
Yeah.
right intention or right thought.
Right. So that's still in the sort of wisdom category, but
Yeah,
again, I love the way it's laid out, right? First the view, and then like with that. So if you've, at the very least, if you've sort of examined the Four Noble Truths, then it hopefully will motivate you where you're like, I have an intention. I want to commit myself to reduce suffering, at the very least, my own suffering, right? It's true. I am dissatisfied and stressed out and all of that. And I want that
yeah,
to go away. Well, then, if that's the case, then how about a commitment to,
yeah,
walking the path, at least learning the path and walking it. And so that's that. And so like, what is that intention? What is that commitment? It's,
right,
like we talked about with the Lojong slogan tonight related to the three yanas, right? There's the aspect of trying to develop loving kindness, for example, like
yeah,
the Mahayana path, developing mindfulness renunciation, like the Hinayana path, for sure,
yeah.
and this aspect of compassion, right? The loving kindness and compassion, like
Hmm.
that's like that, like just those types of things, right? Like that, the intent, like, hey, I see that, I can see that that's a fine thing to do, even if you don't believe, even if you're not yet like fully walking the full eightfold path, right?
Right,
Like even if you're just like, you know what, there's nothing wrong with the idea of just sort of like being willing to let some stuff go. There's
right. Or
nothing,
developing compassion.
being
What like
compassionate and kind, like,
is there
okay,
anything that you're gonna lose? Yeah,
yeah, what's wrong
yeah.
with that?
Right. It's so funny. This is reminding me of a conversation I had with Lama, maybe, I don't know, like a year or two ago. And I was just kind of like complaining about like how tired I am of all of this. I'm so tired of all this like bullshit I'm putting myself through, right? Like all this samsara. And he was like, well, maybe you're not tired enough. Apparently not tired enough, right? Because I'm still dealing with all the bullshit, right?
Right.
And still like really attached to it. And I love,
That's funny.
that this is kind of like asking us to look at, um, also what is my intention for engaging in a path? Do I have the right intention of bodhicitta, and doing this for all of us, rather than trying to, what I think is still probably the case for me is like, I just want to feel okay and like calm, which, those are good things, they're
That's
helpful,
fine.
but having it be the entire intention underlying it is still about me and wanting to get something for this life. And so I think having a more, spreading the intention out is really important. Otherwise, it's going to be a pretty narrow focus
I
on
think,
me.
now I agree with you, but I would say that if that doesn't sound right, if that's not sort of your thing, that you don't get why you should do it sort of for the benefit of more than just you, if you don't want that bigger scope, you really just care about your own problems, your own issues, then it's still perfectly 100% okay and effective to pursue this path. And you might just be a little bit more on the like the Hinayana vehicle, right?
That's true.
And
Yeah.
that's okay. Nothing wrong with that, right? You want to achieve nirvana for yourself, go for it.
Yeah.
You know, it's effective. Go, you know, this will work.
Well, I think maybe what I'm noticing is that for me, that feels like a very limited place. And, you know, it just ends up being this kind of like, I don't know, just like it's a tension place, because it's like I'm not calm, right? And so I'm mad that I'm not there. And what's interesting is that, you know, the Dalai Lama says, you know, if you're going to be selfish, right, do it in a smart way.
That's
and
right.
care about others, right?
Of course.
And go, you know, seek their, you know, well-being, because what we get back, of course, is that we're going to experience that tenfold. And so I have to remember that, is that like, okay, right. I am still a very selfish person. And so if I really want to experience happiness in this life, I do need to turn outwards towards others.
Well, true. And what I think like it's a good intro into the next category, right? Which is the ethical conduct, because regardless of your motivation, right? Even if you're just totally just concerned about your own well-being and happiness, when we get into ethical conduct, that is for your own, you know, your own well-being and happiness, right? That is, you can pursue ethical conduct selfishly, right? Mm-hmm. And it can be effective. And so there's the next 3 points related to ethical conduct.
Well, and I want to say too with this is that, you know, yes, it is for us, it does help our minds and the kind of clutter that can get cleaned out by engaging in ethical conduct. But engaging in ethical conduct makes us safe people for the others around us.
Oh,
and so it totally changes our environment and the people that are around us. So
well, look,
but
the funny thing, that's the funny thing about it, is the more that you really begin to sit with this stuff, and even if you do what the Dalai Lama said, and you're selfish in the right way, in a smart way, but let's just say that you pursue this path selfishly, what you realize is like, you know, truly there is no self, and it is all interconnected, and
it's non-dualistic.
It's non-dualistic. So when I'm doing right speech, right action, right, like when it's right and it's good, then it's right and it's good for all, right?
There it is.
And there isn't this me and other going on. It's okay if that's where you start from. That's fine. We all start from there, right? Totally. But like, no matter what your motivation is, you're going to get to the same point.
I like it. Yeah. Daniel, we might need to do a part 2.
Yeah. No, come on, we got this. Look, maybe.
We can get through points 3 and 4, and then we can do a part 2.
Okay, yeah. I'm down.
Great. Yeah. So that 3, yes, right speech. This one is a challenge for me. I've talked on the show about, you know, that I have a tendency towards divisive speech when I want to make friends with people at work, or, you know, just kind of talking shit about people or about bosses and whatnot. Yeah, I don't like how that feels. I'm also a white liar. Yeah. I tell white lies. Yeah. I even told one today and was like, shit.
I hate that. I know what you're talking about. You know, I write speeches is hard for me as well, but from a slightly different angle. Like, I don't really care much. Like, the gossip stuff doesn't really do it for me. White lies, yeah, but I think I don't know, like that has been something in the past, but I think that it's less problematic. I think that I'm more inclined to lie through omission or something like that. You know what I mean? Where, like, I just like might bend words or whatever, but like Yeah, so there's a little bit of playfulness with language, or I call it playfulness, strategic use of language that might
Right.
be might not be considered right speech, but where two of the things that fall under the right speech that I have problems with are harsh speech and
Mm.
idle chatter. So harsh speech, man, oh gosh, I could be so harsh. Even
Gosh,
when
I
I'm
can't even see you doing that, but I know we
oh,
all
you
have
should hear me
so
when
many different sides.
oh my God, like at work, my brothers and I, oh man, like I can be in a perfectly jovial mood, you know, like there's nothing, I'm not angry or anything. Like
Yeah.
that's not even the reason for the harsh speech, but I can get into that sort of like really hypercritical kind of like just shit talking sort of way, you
Yeah.
know? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like that's a big one for me. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that it's sort of like, it kind of like gets me pumped up, gets me excited,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like that kind of thing. And then the idle chatter thing, oh my gosh, I could talk and talk and talk and not
You're a
say
chatty Cathy.
anything, right? And not say anything at all. And the other people, like, I'm not even aware whether, even if they're getting mad at me, you know, or
Yeah.
whatever, I could just keep going. I can dig holes. And then when people are like, stop digging a hole, I'm like, don't tell me what to do. And then I get out like an excavator and I start digging
You're
even
like,
deeper.
here, I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah, exactly. So like, yeah, whew, right speech is a hard one.
Yeah, it sure is. And yeah, I know it has a really strong effect on my mind, especially now that I'm really working on it. And I notice that I've said something harmful, or I liked how you put it, being playful with language. I'm very skillful at that as well, where I'll just feel pretty uneasy. And so it has this kind of immediate effect on me, which it didn't used to. So I think that's a really good sign, is that it's
Yes.
like, okay, I'm starting, it's starting to sink in that this, ethical conduct thing is really important and valuable. And so I'm hoping that maybe what that is that there's like some immediate karma that's happening, right? Where I'm like, okay, I just get to like experience the karma of that action right now, because I like just feel kind of crappy. So maybe I don't have to experience the effect of it later. That's my hope.
I hope for your sake as well. The one thing what I will say about this is, and maybe we'll end at this third point.
Yeah.
Okay. So with right speech, I remember something that I think it was like at my kids' school where they were promoting kindness, right? And they were clear to distinguish between being nice and being kind. And I think that with it, so the idea behind right speech is that we're practicing speech that's truthful, harmonious, pleasant, and beneficial. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's nice, right?
Mm,
It doesn't have to have like sugary sweetness to it, but it should be kind. So it has to do with like the condition of our, like where it's coming from, right? And
mm,
like if we are practicing compassion and loving kindness, it doesn't mean that the language can't come out firm, right? Or it can't
yeah.
be clear. That it can't be something that might be interpreted in a like not in an unfriendly way, but just that like not necessarily like nice, like, but it's still kind.
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting point, and something that I want to reflect on more for myself, because I can tend to just go the super nice route, which is not always
Same.
kind, right? Because
No,
if
no.
someone's not going to learn from their mistakes, that's not being kind. That's, yeah, just continuing the suffering. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's funny. Talking to Matthew yesterday, he told me about we were just chatting, and he told me about a situation where just a friend of his, where he felt like it was really important for him to call them out on some of their behavior, and he was kind, but he said they didn't interpret it as being very nice.
That
Um,
happens a lot, right?
and I was like, like if that was me, I'd just be like, whatever, you go, like, good for you, you do you, like whatever. But like this sort of
Mm,
like and it's not helpful, right? And it's not actually being a good friend necessarily, right? And so I was sort of inspired by that, where I'm like, no, it's okay to say what you got to say, speak from the heart, be honest, you know,
Yeah.
be mindful. Lama, he did recently talk about this as well. Where he was like, you know, it's not just, you know, like your intention. You have to also think about how the other party is going to receive it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's complicated because we don't always know how people are going to receive it. And also you know, there's what's going around lately a lot is, you know, intent versus impact, you know. So
Yes.
sometimes you might have really great intent, but the impact is that it was really harmful. And so that's a very, it's very complex.
Maybe we can put a plug in though at this point, since we're talking about right speech for nonviolent communication.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a great framework for just at least beginning to think about the way that we talk to each other.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've found that to be both helpful and very hard to put into practice.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that is not. I think just seeing it, understanding it is helpful in its own right. I don't know that, you know, forcing yourself to go, you know, like to do it in
the 4 steps every time.
No. I don't know that that's necessary or helpful.
Right. But yeah, a kind of framework for like just getting across, this is how something made me feel, you know. Right. And this is why it hurt. You know, it's really valuable for people to know that.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow, we only made it through 3 points.
I know, and it's
what a dissection. We only only dissected it a little bit.
I know, and I mean, each one of these could be a whole hour.
Oh
plus,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So we have a lot more to talk about next week, and I'm looking forward to that.
We'll keep talking about ethical conduct and mental discipline.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Daniel, for being such a great friend.
Thank you, Jac. You know what? I can tell from the beginning of the show to the end of the show, you feel lighter. You know?
I really do. I genuinely do. Yeah, the weight is lifted. I'm not all fuzzy in the head.
We successfully distracted you for a little bit.
Yes, and I don't think of Dharma as a distraction. I think of Dharma as I'm engaging. So this is good.
Thank you so much, Jac. This is fantastic.
Absolutely. Same. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.